Hey friends, I'm here with Claybrin McMath, who is someone that I've had dealings with in the past, and we also were both part of a basketball club in the local area here. Clay's actually back in Adelaide these days, and he's one of the most entertaining people that I know personally. And hilarious Instagram, the Facebook stuff is on point, and he's also doing a lot of creative stuff, which is probably why, out of all the sports people that I've had the pleasure of meeting through the Bandits, that Clay is probably the most interesting person to me, because he had a whole nother side that he maybe wasn't as afraid to show, or he maybe embraced more than other athletes would. So, Clay, the way this show works is that we start kind of a little bit in reverse. We talk about what you're doing right now, and then go back to the start and try to work back to how we got there. So,
I like that. The Tarantino interview. We'll do it like Tarantino does his movies.
I'm not a massive Tarantino, like, as far as the methodology. I like the movies, but if you're saying that, I'll take that as a big compliment. Can we just talk about maybe that's something that has you excited right now, whether it's your podcast or whatever, then we'll go back and talk about how we got there.
Oh, yeah, man. I mean, just the podcast is sort of over probably the last month has had its biggest jump in listens. I'd say largely due to a guest that I had on. His name is Dave O'Slots. He's an online streamer. People are usually used to watching or hearing about video game streamers, but he actually streams his online gambling activity, and he's a very charismatic guy. So a lot of his sort of viewers or listeners have come over to my podcast, which was huge for me. So very happy about how we've been traveling over the last month or so.
So the podcast has one of the great podcast names for the people that are listening. It's called Welcome to the Poddy, which
yes,
I couldn't believe when yourself, and I think when the show first launched, maybe Dante Nicholas, that is a former teammate of Clay's, was involved.
Yes.
How did you get a name, Welcome to the Poddy? Like, you'd think that surely someone would have said that phrase and had it as a podcast, because I'd heard people say that, just like maybe not Welcome to the Poddy, but I'd heard podcasts referred to as a poddy before.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's real mainstream to call a podcast a poddy. I've heard a lot of podcast hosts say pod.
Yeah.
So I think maybe Poddy got skipped over or something, and we were just sitting there one night. I think I missed one game or maybe two games. I had to go to New Zealand for a family situation, and I was just listening to so many podcasts while I was gone, and I was just like, shit, like, and I know this is pretty corny because a lot of people do this sort of same thing, but like, oh, I can do that or whatever. But I mean, we were talking before you started recording about how difficult it actually is to maintain the production of a show. But I just said to Dante, I texted him while I was in New Zealand. I was like, we are starting a podcast as soon as I get back to Albury. And instead of that just being a bit of talk, I basically got back, landed, and went straight to JB Hi-Fi and bought the first mic, which we shared. We just shared one mic, and we sat down one night and we were talking. We were saying, what is it, like the Poddy boys? And Poddy was just sort of the first thing we said, and we came up with a whole bunch of puns, and Welcome to the Poddy just seemed like the perfect name for the show.
The thing that you've done, which is, in retrospect, is brilliant, is you basically are covering off on the intro and the name of the show in one phrase. Like, it's mastery, really, Clay.
I mean, happy accident, I suppose.
Yeah. So the one thing that you did say in there, and the way this show works, if you haven't listened before, Clay, is we definitely go down rabbit holes. So I hope you're okay with that. You mentioned,
big fan of rabbit holes.
Yeah, you mentioned that you actually went out and got the microphone, and I know as someone that's been making podcasts, lots of different shows for about 8 or 9 years now, the number of people that I know that have said to me, I want to start, and have done absolutely nothing to make it happen. Like, it is as simple sometimes as, okay, maybe we can't build a studio, but let's go get a microphone and see if we're actually any good.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Sometimes people talk a big game and don't let anything happen. And that's something that I used to pride myself on when I was playing ball. If someone wanted to talk shit, if I was going to talk shit back to them, I better make sure that I back it up, and I made sure that I did on most occasions. And so when I said I was going to buy a mic, I bought a mic, and it's just about being accountable, I guess. So now I've got a pretty, decent. I'll put a fair bit of money into it now, so the studio in here is pretty set up pretty nicely, and yeah, we're just looking to grow.
Nice. So before we move a little bit forward from how you started the podcast, and we'll probably talk a little bit of basketball because that's how Clay and I first got to know each other.
Mm-hmm.
It must have been pretty funny for a guy of your size. So people that are listening, if you don't know Clay, just from memory, you're 6'8", and at that point you were in premium condition in the 2016-ish time frame. You were super fit. Dante probably was weighing in at probably heavier than you, and he's 6'5"-ish. These two really big athletic dudes huddled at a little table with one microphone.
Yeah.
Do you have any photos or any memories of just how strange that situation seems to you now as someone that has a room set up?
I mean, it was the audio quality going back wasn't as nice as it is now, but it worked and it was raw, and I think that was part of the charm to begin with. So we actually got off to a bit of a running start in terms of listeners, as limited as the metrics are still for podcasters, but. Yeah, there's some pictures of us. We just had the microphone up on sort of high gain, so it was just picking up everything in the room. So it was a bit annoying when our other housemates were, grabbing plates and cups and shit because you could hear it all.
I actually have a note. Sorry to cut you off. I have a note written down. One moment early in the podcast that really stood out was, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but I think that at the time, everyone knows who was playing for the team. So Greg Mays was the centre, and he was making so much noise. And then Debba George must have walked out, and apparently Debba's an incredibly polite, quiet person, but he wasn't making any noise. And it was either yourself or Dante are like, Greg, look at this. That's a quiet person. Be like that.
Yeah.
And I don't know how it went down, but it must have been pretty funny that, like, back then, no one really would have even understood what you were doing, I don't think. You're doing a podcast. Yeah. You're basketball players. What do you mean you're doing a podcast?
Yeah, it was just, I guess the guys in the team probably understood it very well. Me and Dante were easily the most outspoken on the team. You can probably include Corey in that mix from my first year with the Bandits as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, we talked a lot of shit on and off the floor, and the natural progression was to start recording it, I guess, because we thought people were missing out.
And it was. I started listening because I knew you guys, and it was really funny. And obviously over time, the quality's just gone up and up. And I've been thinking about, and I'm going to get this out of the way early, and I apologise, Clay, if I'm a bit clumsy in how I say this, but for me, with my background, what I'm interested in, the comedians that I like, the music I grew up with, etc., it feels to me like I've been welcomed into a little cultural universe that I wouldn't normally have access to.
Well, I wouldn't call that clumsy.
I think you've done an amazing job of making people like myself that have maybe no connection to higher level of athletics or a connection to the hip-hop culture or any of that sort of stuff. You've made it a very welcoming experience for people like me that have always had an interest but didn't really have an avenue, if that makes sense. So,
yeah.
Is that something you were trying to do, or do you think that's just maybe your own background that's just you've got such a large scope of interests and that it's just fed into the show?
Yeah, I'm just very I've got a lot of interests and I've sort of dabbled in everything. It hasn't actually been released yet, but I actually have recorded a hip-hop mixtape as well.
All right.
I'm planning on starting some to do a little bit of stand-up at some open mics before the end of this year. It was my sort of New Year's resolution to at least get one open mic under my belt this year. So yeah, I sort of get amongst everything that I've got interest in, and I do try to get as much history as I can as well, and respect what it is that I've got my interest in. I like to respect those things as much as I can. So I go as far back as possible, and I listen to, Big Daddy Kane and Rakim and, Slick Rick, and I just mix it up. I try to go worldwide. I listen to a little bit of French hip hop, but who knows what they're saying, but it sounds good. I like the grime stuff. And then with comedy, I go back to Red Fox and, George Carlin and Richard Pryor, and I try and listen to all those greats, as well as, all the access we have to all of that stuff on Netflix and Hulu and Stan and whatever else everything's on these days. I just try to absorb all of it and find inspiration where I can, and I get very interested in it, and I want to share that with everybody that listens to me talk as much shit as I do. They deserve to get a little bit of, a bit of knowledge along the way. Yeah, learn something at least.
I've gone and checked out some of the artists you've talked about, having no real connection to the pathway of how you get from this artist to that one to that artist. I've just kind of realised that if I listen to your podcast and you're talking about a musical artist, that's a sensible place for me to start if I wanted to check out what you're listening to or what is big in that particular culture or whatever. Yeah, it's been helpful. So you're doing a good job with that as well. Yeah,
and you don't want to. I mean, some people do want to isolate a particular audience. I don't really. I am very sport, comedy, and hip hop focused, but I try to make that focus relatable for everyone. So there's a lot of, sometimes I might say a hip hop quote or something, but I won't just leave after that. I'll say where it's from or whatever. So people who might not know a particular Jay-Z line, will then know that it's Jay-Z and what he meant by it or something like that.
That's good to know, because I can never follow any of Jay-Z's lines, so I need as much help as I can get. Half the time I think I know what he's saying, and then I see lyrics or something under a video online. I'm like, okay, that's not at all what he's saying.
Yeah. And I mean, my missus is she's not a huge hip hop head, so sometimes I get a bit of practice of breaking stuff down when I'm having conversations with her. So just this weekend we were listening to the Eminem and Machine Gun Kelly beef, and I was sort of breaking down each line and telling her why he said this and where it originated and all that kind of stuff as well.
Wow, you're like a hip hop translator, mate. That's good to know. So let's just maybe move into your time in basketball.
Yeah.
Were you playing like junior or state league in South Australia? Was that your first introduction to a higher level of basketball? Or
yeah, well, I actually didn't start playing until I was about 13. Like, I mean, I always played like at school and stuff like that, but I was always a shy kid, so I actually never wanted to play club basketball because I didn't want to meet new people. It gave me anxiety, so I just never did. And then I turned 13, and that's when your goals are forming, and I wanted to be like Dad. I wanted to go to college. I wanted to try out for the Bulls. I wanted to play in Europe and all of this. And Dad was like, "Well, you understand. You probably have to play club ball." So I went and I played for my local team, Sturt, who at the time was very well known for developing their juniors, and I think I've got to give the lion's share of my development credit to, well, my dad for one, but also Sturt for sort of building me from a raw sort of kid that loved the game into a well-skilled sort of all-round player.
Now, I know that club, just from memory, do they have any involvement in the state league at the higher level? Like, are they a bigger club with kind of, or is it a purely Adelaide-based club?
Just an Adelaide-based club, but like there's all the like national club champs and stuff, and Sturt's always in that for every age group as well. So yeah, you see them. People in the basketball community know Sturt as a club. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So that was basically, I'm assuming you played both high school ball and you were playing with Sturt through those high school years.
Yeah.
When did it maybe become a reality that I've got the athletic gifts and also I've developed enough from the skills perspective and understanding of the game for college to become a realistic thing? Did you have an idea of that early, or was that later in your development?
That's a very good question. I don't think it ever was a doubt. And I don't mean that in terms of like I thought I was so good, but it was just sort of like, this is what my dad did, this is what I want to do. And I didn't have so much of a thought about how difficult the road may be. I just sort of thought it was going to happen. I think it was more my grades in school. That was what made me think like, oh yeah, I really am going to be able to do this. It was, more of a question of, Dad was always telling me, make sure your grades are up, make sure your grades are up. And I maintained good grades. And so I always just thought I was going to go regardless of sort of my skill set. And I guess I knew that being at one of the better clubs in Adelaide and being one of the better players on that team, I knew I was in the right space.
Righto. So let's just skip forward a little bit, Clay. Can you tell us a little bit about the college that you went to and maybe the league that club's in, and then we can knuckle down on a few college stories if you're okay with that?
Yeah, well, I went to Bryant University, which is in a small town, Smithfield, Rhode Island. And Smithfield, if it sounds familiar, the one thing that I've ever seen pop culture-wise that relates to Smithfield is The Conjuring was based in Smithfield.
Yeah, right.
My recruiting class was the first Division 1 recruiting class. So they used to be a Division 2 school and they were transitioning to Division 1. And so I thought that would be the best opportunity for me to get minutes straight away. And so that was really the selling point, to go to a lesser known school in a small town. I just thought this, I could potentially make this my team. It didn't quite work out, the fairy tale ending that I thought it might have been, but I had a reasonable career and still managed to, tick a few boxes along the way.
Yeah, okay. So with the move from Div 2 to Div 1, obviously you made the decision of it's going to be higher level of competition, but the team itself is from a smaller university.
Yeah, and so in our first year, we won one game. We went 1-30.
So just for some context for people that don't follow basketball that closely, how big a difference is there between, a strong Div 2 team in that area in the States and also, a bottom level Div 1 team? Obviously there's a jump, but how big is that jump, do you think? Is it pretty substantial or?
Bottom level Div 1 and top level Div 2 are pretty close.
Yeah.
But when you go to like mid-level Div 1, any Div 2 team should get blown out. Across the country, there may be some exceptions to that rule, but in general, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So obviously there must have been some appeal to also being in the United States if you had an interest in hip-hop culture or basketball in general. It's kind of the mecca. So how did you find that aspect, the travel and, being on campus? I'm assuming you're on campus.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess the first question, the travel.
You did mention that you weren't massive on meeting new people. So that must have been pretty hard.
Yeah. And I would say it's probably one of my biggest regrets was how much I kept to myself my freshman year.
Yeah. Okay.
For the majority of freshman year, I really only associated with the team, and I didn't really grow a big network outside of the team until my sophomore year, when I was a bit more comfortable, and people knew me and they would approach me more than me approaching them. Which if I could do it again, that would be probably my first point of action, would be to go out and start making new friends and doing that sort of stuff straight away.
How old were you when you actually were doing that? Because I know that when I think back to my university days, there were so many things that I look back on now and think, you were standoffish or you were shy or you were rude to that person or whatever. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that in a way, I was still a kid.
Yeah, I mean, I was 19 when I started college. A lot of growth in that 5 years, and I think a lot of people can be stunted in college as well, because it is nothing like real life, and it's nothing like university over here. And you really,
how can you say that? It's nothing like real life. I completely agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, I'll just talk from my perspective to begin with. I was on, I'm on a full scholarship. I'm not paying for, books, tuition, board, food, anything. So I'm not accruing any debt, and I've just got no responsibilities. I've got to make sure I get to practice. I've got to make sure that I keep a 2.2 grade point average, which is like a C plus, which is, nothing.
Yeah.
So it was just, I was just in this world where all I needed to do was work out and, hit the books from time to time. So, the parties and all of that. I went to a small school, and a small school, saying that, is still 4,000 people, and it was not a commuter school. So most of these people live on campus. So, I mean, there's parties and stuff, like you can find something to do every night. And I mean, at a bigger school, it would probably be a much larger risk of sort of being distracted from what you're there to do. So that was another thing that I sort of had that internal dialogue about before I committed to go to Bryant. Was, I think, if I go to a bigger school, it may be detrimental to me if I do get caught up in the party scene.
Yeah.
But it's just it's a fishbowl, and everybody knows everybody's business, and you think Albury's bad, but when you're at a college and everybody's between 19 and 25 and everybody loves to talk and everybody loves to fuck, it can turn into a bit of a shit show. But I mean, it's a fun shit show.
Yeah, right. Well, I agree that university it'd be good if it was a little bit more like real life at times. I think, like, I came out with an economics and finance degree, and I had to do my own research as to how a super fund works. So for it, like Clay being in Australia, and anyone else understands that, but if you're not from Australia, essentially it's a 401k or a retirement fund. Now, don't you think if you're doing a 3.5 year like economics and finance degree, that you might actually leave university knowing how a super fund works? Like, but
you know what a hypotenuse is, though, right?
I knew a lot of useless crap. Like, what's the one thing that affects normal people the most when it comes to finance in their life? In Australia, at least, it's your super fund.
Super funds and mortgages.
Yeah, and you don't know any of that. So, yeah, it's not like real life. So, talking about not real life, let's just move forward maybe to Albury-Wodonga now. So, from memory, that was your first, I guess you would call it, semi-pro or paid basketball gig. I can't, just from memory, correct me if I'm wrong. So, had you ever been to Albury-Wodonga before, Clay, or was it your first time when you came here to play?
No, so I played a nationals in, I think it was under 20s. So I was there for that, and then when I was at the AIS, which is the Australian Institute of Sport, we played in the Seabull. So I actually believe it was opening round. I think it was round one of the Seabull in maybe 2018. I'm going to say, yeah, we came to Albury for that game.
Oh, so you were playing with the COE at that point?
Yeah.
Okay. I really started going regularly to the games, I think, in 2011. So I might have.
Oh, and when I said 2018, I actually meant 2008.
Yeah, sorry. I thought that was the case. So, yeah. So obviously that team, the Bandits, if you're not familiar with what we're talking about, was pretty loaded that first year. You had a lot of success yourself. You were a great find. Somehow Brad worked his mystical magic and talked Deborah out of Hobart, which the previous season didn't seem realistic, and stumbled upon Dante, who ended up one of the best players in the league, and Corey was just obviously a real talent, but wasn't coming from the best situation, what had led up to that. He was having some pretty hard times in his life. And it was just a melting pot of a lot of raw firepower, and it worked on the court and it seemed to work off the court, but I don't know. From cleaning up your boys' houses after the season, I'm not sure anything happened off the court, but just that's a joke, by the way. There wasn't a whole lot of cleaning going on.
There was absolutely that first season for sure was there was absolutely no static or anything at all.
Yeah.
And I think that comes with winning as well. It's just is really hard to have a bad time.
Yeah, because obviously at home you guys were basically unbeatable, except for, from memory, I think Wadding might have hit 9 out of 10 threes in one half. I think that was in one game, and I think that might have been the only game you lost at home that year. And obviously the team was very loaded, so you're winning away. Can I just tell Clay, we don't need to relitigate the whole Bandits experience, but can I tell you about one moment from the second season that actually still means a lot to me as being a real fan of the club? And you were right that there was a little bit of a different vibe through that second season. The team was still loaded in a way, but not quite in the same way across the board. Like defensively maybe wasn't as strong. Obviously that was nothing to do with yourself. You're one of our best defensive players, but it sounds like hyperbole when I talk about it, but Albury-Wodonga Bandits versus the Geelong Supercats is some of the best non-super professional basketball I've ever seen. Like those two teams pushed each other to another level.
I agree.
Yeah, and if you were ever going to say this is how good Seaball basketball can be, some of those games that you guys played against them was exceptional. 2016, the first final in Geelong, I think there was about maybe 20 Albury-Wodonga fans in this massive stadium.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Several times throughout the years, the Bandits had basically beaten Geelong right at the death knell, and it happened to get on a putback dunk at the end of that game when it looked like everything was done. And the thing that stands out to me the most wasn't the actual thing. It was the fact that the team ran down the court and the fans were face-to-face with the team, and there was probably only 20 people on the court and 20 people in the crowd. And I think with all the yelling and celebrating, we pretty much filled that entire stadium up. And, and in that one moment, it was kind of like all of the negativity from the whole season was gone. It was just pure happiness. And even on like your face and Dante and some of the bigger personalities on the team, does that moment stick out to you thinking back that was a really great... you beat the team that you'd beaten already a couple of times a year before, but 20 minutes earlier, that didn't seem like it was possible.
Yeah, and I think the fact that we had a bit of a rough season, very up and down season, we didn't think we were even going to be in playoffs, and somehow, I don't know, a couple of results went our way and we ended up having to play in Geelong. So we didn't really feel like we were supposed to even be there, and then to come away with that win and against a team of our rivals was huge. And having a bus full of you guys there as well, to add insult to injury at the end of that game to those guys was a great little highlighter over the top of that.
Yeah, like we made a lot of noise for 15 to 20 people. I was a bit, and I think because that hall they have, hearing 1,000 people go dead silent and only like 20 or 30 people screaming their heads off, it kind of stands out more than if a whole stadium's making noise. And you guys would have got some pretty dirty looks walking out, but we left straight away, obviously, and we were getting real dirty looks, Clay.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Like you walk out and it's like the Australian fucking Open. They've got all these life-size model, like pictures of their players lining all these pillars, and we're walking out going, you're lost. What are you talking about? You don't need pillars. You're lost. And then we get out on the bus, and the bus driver reverses the bus into the wall of the stadium just for a bit of extra spite. That was, I don't think he meant that, but fuck, it was funny.
Yeah, no, that was a great game, and it was, it was good to be able to play that extended season in a year that we thought we were going home early.
There was a lot of great moments over those couple of years, but that was one that stood out for me. So we'll move forward now, Clay, to your post-basketball life, I guess, for the lack of a better term. And like, there's not just the podcast that you've been doing. There's all these things that live around the podcast and feed into it. And Clay's reviews, we can talk about that because I really enjoy those. There's Clay in the kitchen, which we can talk about. There's Clay's head on other people's heads, which I think is hilarious. So
Yeah.
let's just talk. Is that all just creative interests that you have that feed into the podcast, or are they just, is that what it's all kind of feeding back to, or are these individual ideas that you just like to dabble with?
No, okay, so I guess it's sort of two answers to that question. Is one, the Clay in the kitchen. I do cook a lot at home, and I rate myself a little bit in the kitchen. So when I've cooked a nice meal, whether it's for friends, family, myself, my girlfriend, I do enjoy talking a little bit of shit about how good I've done. And then I was just like, well, I may as well start a little cooking show, and it doesn't need to be 30 minutes of some wanker, grating carrots and shit like you see on Channel 2 on a Sunday. You can be a little 8-minute video and actually some achievable stuff instead of, MasterChef is fun to watch, but you can't make any of that stuff.
No. And if you try, it's going to be a bloody disaster. So,
yeah. And I like it. I like keeping it simple, and I like talking a little bit of shit with it instead of, I like how Jamie Oliver pats himself on the back. He keeps calling his food gorgeous and all of that. But, I like to add a little bit of mature audience stuff in there and say, this is fucking delicious, and grind up a little bit of this bitch in there and that kind of stuff. So I thought that'd be pretty good content. And I don't release it as religiously as I release the podcast, but when I've got a good idea and a bit of extra time on my hands, I try to get another episode out.
What I find is funny, and it's just because of your physical stature, that you kind of have to have a certain group of shots that to get your entire body from your eye level and all the way where you're speaking and all the way down to where you're cutting. You have to have some really big vertical shots that would never be in a cooking show.
Yeah.
Just because you're 6 or 7 inches taller than any other cook that's on the TV. So
yeah, and I don't have a particularly tall countertop either, so it is a bit funny.
It
like
actually
that.
adds to the humour a little bit because it's kind of like the knife and everything looks so tiny because it's right down the bottom of the screen. Yeah,
and we did notice that after the first episode that we made, but that was a happy accident because I didn't actually intend for it to look like that, but there's no escaping it.
Yeah. So we might leave Clay's reviews till last because they're very well, they're really well worded and well written, and I'm assuming there's a fair bit of thought put into those. But let's just talk about a couple of the other funny things first.
Yeah.
There was one, I saw that you were doing the Clay's head on other people's heads.
Yeah.
There was one that you did it was this really famous pose that The Rock has on his Instagram, and your face, I had to do a double take to think, how did he blend that together? Because sometimes it's more obvious than others.
Yeah.
Was that, where did that idea come from? And obviously you're doing the little quips. I think you had one, everybody loves Claymont was one of them that I thought was pretty funny. Because just going back, how I got to know that Clay was a creative person at heart, more so than an athlete even, was that one of my best friend, Daniel Caulfield, worked with Clay at Optus. And he tapped me on the shoulder one day and he said, Josh, you'd really like Clay because he does some shit on Snapchat that's just wacko creative. So you've been doing that for a long time. These creative ideas and experimentations and...
Yeah, and I think it's just really with that stuff, it's easy to pump stuff out on Instagram and Facebook that relates to the show. So if I'm talking about, NBA, I'm posting NBA players, or if I'm talking about, you name it, some dude's murdered somebody, I'm posting a picture of him. I'm posting pictures of Harvey Weinstein or whatever. And it's very easy for it to lose my personality. So I just made a conscious effort. I was like, my face needs to be out there. I'm putting all this work in there, and I'm sort of forgetting to put my face on anything. And then I was just like, well, put my face on everything. And that's really how it happened. And now I just try to find iconic things that people people understand. So I try to not really do it so much with like NBA, which I talk about a lot on the show, but because, you know, I'd say 30 to 50% of my audience probably aren't NBA fans. So there's no point of that. So I try to do it more with iconic figures like The Rock and, you know, I had Lil Wayne a couple of weeks ago and, just people that people know and that will be funny. I can do a little pun most of the time. So the Lil Wayne one, it was Lil Clane. Everybody loves Claymond and all that kind of stuff. So it's just being able to keep blasting out steady content and having a bit of fun with it.
Let's maybe chat some Clay's reviews. So I think when Dan first told me that you were producing bits of content for different things, I think the first thing I started really noticing was that you were doing, and it might have just been on your blog at that point, Clay, possibly you were doing movie reviews, and you've continued to do that. Yeah,
no, I've been doing movie reviews since I was in college. So we used to have what we called Movie Tuesdays. So I think it was like $9 movies. So me and a few of the boys would get together and go to the movies every Tuesday night. And I would only do movie reviews for the movie that I saw on that Tuesday. And it's gradually turned into any movie that I saw at the cinemas, and now it's any movie that I watched that I haven't reviewed before. And so I'll just bang those out there. And I've just always been a lover of film. I did have dreams to sort of like become a film writer, and that dream was actually crushed when I wrote a script called Paranormal Blacktivity. And the year that I finished writing that script, the movie A Haunted House by the Wayans brothers came out, which was essentially my exact fucking movie. So I was just like, this is a hard business. I give up. So I never wrote another script again, but I do enjoy watching films and giving them a little review. And that's probably one of the things I get the most feedback on is I get people saying like, oh, I only watch movies now that you've given a 7 or above, or why don't you review this? I got a lot of recommendations which are just sitting in the inbox because it's just too hard to get to all of them.
Yeah, gosh, there's so much content out there now, video related. Yeah. One thing I like, Clay, I guess, is just, and you would know having an interest in film, particularly with the Disney Corporation, if you track back who owns what website, or who owns the company that owns a website, or who owns the company that owns a company that owns the website, Disney owns so much, and you don't realize that they own it, or Universal is the eventual owner, or whoever, that everybody's a shill. No movie's bad. And if their movie happens to be made by the company that owns them, apparently it's better than what it actually is.
Yeah.
For me, Captain Marvel, my second least favorite Marvel movie. Apparently it's the greatest movie ever. It's not. I'm sorry. Your reviews are just honest.
That yet, but I saw a lot of stuff, and I kind of expected it. And I don't want to get too welcome to the Poddy on punching sideways here, but I kind of expected them to say it was going to be the best thing ever when they, made the strongest superhero a woman. I just knew they were going to blow that up out of proportion a bit. And I mean, Wonder Woman actually was a really good movie.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
But she's not Captain Marvel, so it was a huge release. But I knew Captain Marvel was going to be talked about in that way before anyone had even seen it.
Yeah, I was hoping that it would be good because I'd heard only that it was bad from people that I trust.
Yeah,
thought maybe it can't be that bad. And then I went to it, it really was that bad. But what I like about your reviews is they're unaffected by anyone's opinion.
Yeah.
So the people that trust your reviews know that whether you're reviewing it as a 2 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10, or mostly somewhere in between, that is actually what you think.
Yeah.
Do you find over time that you're starting to have people find your reviews that you don't actually know, like new people all the time?
Oh, absolutely. I was just telling a story about a week ago to a friend of mine. I went out to a bar. This is probably almost a year ago, but I was out at a bar and I had this girl tapping on my shoulder, and I turn around and she's not even looking at me. She's like waving her boyfriend over, and she's saying, "This is the movie guy. This is the movie guy." And I was like, "What the fuck is going on here?" But
you must have also been thinking, "Yes, yes,
yeah." I've had because I tag people from the movies. I do the reviews, and I've had a couple of people follow me, and you know how they do the follow and the classic follow and unfollow because they don't actually want to follow you.
Yeah.
I had Seth Rogen do that.
Oh wow.
And then a lesser known name was. Did you watch that TV series You on Netflix?
No, but I saw it. I didn't watch it.
Yeah, one of the girls from that followed me for like a week. So that's pretty cool when stuff like that happens, and then you can kind of see a little bit of influx of activity around that as well.
So why did she unfollow you? Who's this guy? He's so tall. He cooks food. Like, what's going on? He doesn't hold the camera.
I think it's just I think they follow you, and I think they're trying to get more followers. So I think that was the sort of situation, and then they realize that they're following a nobody, and then they unfollow you, and your head deflates.
It is funny when you get a retweet or a like on a tweet or something from a celebrity. Like, I'm a massive fan of the radio show Kate, Tim and Marty.
Oh, yep.
Marty Sheargold, I think, is the funniest person there is. Like, his darkness appeals to my dark heart. And the Tim Blackwell is probably the most gifted technician as far as hosting a show that I've ever heard on Australian radio as well. And he quite often will just throw a like on my tweets that I tweet to him, or like there's certain celebrities, and a lot of them are local, that maybe because they're outside the Hollywood bubble, that they are kind of more like, I feel that that's a little bit more real.
Yeah.
Whereas if I had a big celebrity, like a Hugh Jackman or some other person that's over in the States that you got, if they were to like your tweet, there would be, to begin with, it probably wouldn't be them. It'd be their assistant that's hitting like on it. But yeah. But it must still be good to know that there's, real people out there that are following your reviews. Is there any particular review that you've had a more, how do I say this, that hit a chord with people more than what you were expecting? Because I know there have been a few where I thought that's exactly how I would have described that movie. And the fact, and it was one of the movies that was nominated for an Oscar, and you said basically it's not that good. But I can't remember.
Well, you don't remember it?
No, but I remember it was a movie where everyone was going off about how great it was. Might have been what was that movie where the lady was in the fish tank and she was in love with like the marine creature, The Sound of Water, or the.
Yeah, I never saw that, so that wouldn't have been it. But yeah, that sounded fucking dumb.
Agreed.
And it's just like they place that kind of shit up on a pedestal, but then like the crux of it is that fucking movie is bestiality.
Yeah, it's not good, is it? And
it just got all of this hype and like how beautiful is that, and like, real love. And I was like, what? This woman fucks a fish, man. Like, what are you talking about? How alternative or like how liberal do you want to be about it? It's so crazy. It is so crazy.
Yeah, that had some themes to it that were a little bit dicey. So, so I guess getting back to my actual question, is there any review that you remember doing that you just thought that's pretty cool, and then people have, an outsized response, I guess, for the lack of a better term?
Oh, I wish I could answer your question better than this, but no, there's so many that I've done that it's hard to even remember what movies I've reviewed. But I know like a few of them, people will say like, oh, only a 7 or something like that, and I'll just give them a cheeky response back and say it's fucking Clay's reviews. It's not Jim's reviews or Jan's reviews. It's fucking Clay's reviews. So that's the score, 7 out of 10.
You have to be pretty fucking good to be a 5 out of 5 or a 10 out of 10.
Exactly. That's what I try to tell everyone, Josh. That's the thing.
I like that you're holding that line. Like, if you give something 9 out of 10, you're saying that it's better pretty much than nearly every movie ever on IMDb except for The Shawshank Redemption.
Thank you. And this is what I try to tell everybody is people are like, only a 7, but I'm like, to me, 7 is a very good, watchable movie and you should go see it.
Yeah.
And then once I start saying 8, 8.5, 9, you're talking Oscar nominations and possibly wins. Yeah. And then when you start talking about 9.5, 10, you're talking about the best films ever made.
Yeah. You're talking about Godfather and Godfather Part 2 sort of territory. So
yeah, and I've given a few 10s. I think I gave The Revenant a 10 and I think I gave Interstellar a 10.
Yeah, like those are, I mean, I don't know whether I would have given them a 10, but they're definitely some of the best movies of the last 10 years.
Yeah, and I think I mean, Green Book, I think I would have given a 9.
I haven't seen that, but I've heard that I mean, that won an Oscar, didn't it? Didn't it?
Yeah, that did win Best Film.
I like that you're holding the line on it. I think that's probably why I think that there's a shift happening where there's so many shills for big companies on the internet doing reviews because their boss's boss is actually a different company and it's nearly always Disney.
Yeah.
That you can't trust critics anymore. You can either go and get the audience score, which if it's made up of a popular movie, it could be thousands of reviews.
Yeah.
Off IMDb or Amazon or Rotten Tomatoes before they changed all their stuff. You could only really trust the crowd. You couldn't trust critics anymore because they're all getting paid by somebody.
Yeah, but then there's also the problem with that is how much of the crowd knows film and what are they watching? Are they watching for lighting and direction and
they most of them would have pretty bad taste.
Or are they watching for explosions and big titties?
Well, I think we're all watching for that, Clay, let's be honest. You just made me think of Total Recall for some reason then. I was just thinking explosion, titties, Total Recall.
Is that she's got 3 titties, right?
Yeah. Which, when you're a little kid, it's like, whoa, jeez.
Yeah, bonus.
The Land Before Time, this is great. Yeah, so sometimes I try not to like every one you do because I actually really like the reviews, but I do remember that you put out, it was like a group post where it was, I think it might have been the end of 2017 or something. It had favourite 10 whatevers, and one of them you had 5 favourite Canadians.
Yeah.
And I think I just had the girl from Riverdale, whatever her name is. What's her name? Vanessa Morgan, who blows my mind. She's so amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I had her 5 times. And
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Because she's just the most beautiful person I've ever seen. And
well, Seth Rogen, funnily enough, was one of my favourite Canadians, and he actually threw me a like for that as well.
Oh, really? Because that one was like, oh, there's so much great stuff out of Canada, but then there's her.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether... But then you got me thinking, like, that probably wouldn't... There's not a lot of pages out there to put out fun stuff like that of it's not what's your favourite movie, it's what's your favourite Canadian thing. Yeah. And that's kind of a level deeper of, oh, well, it's not... They're going to be not quite as famous and they're going to be kind of a little bit less known.
Yeah, and it's just a bit of fun. It's not the same shit that you can find on BuzzFeed every second page. It's just something else that people may not have thought of, or maybe they've thought of it, but they're not putting content out there, so they haven't seen it anywhere else. So I just try to mix it up.
And I do love when I go into the comments on your post, it's so fun that it's a very cordial environment. Like you'll have someone posting about how they love the review and their name's, Lawnmower Murderer Man 59. Yeah. And he's just throwing you a love heart on Instagram. Yeah, yeah, it's good stuff. Yeah. Righto, mate. So I guess we'll probably just start winding it up because I'm sure we'll be able to talk again in the future about how things are progressing. But just to go back to the podcast, is there any particular guest that, and just so people that are still with us know, the show, I guess you would say, is even less safe for work than Punching Sideways and probably a little bit edgier. Is there any particular place where you think the people that listen to this show might find a good entry into your show? Like, is there any really great guests that stand out? Or
I feel like I've had a lot of great guests. I've had one on the show twice by the name of Sean Hartopoulos, who is a film director out of New York. And he's really great to talk to, and he's got a lot of intent in the films that he makes, and he really makes stuff that he wants to make. And yeah, he's great. Yeah, great to talk to. I'd say Sean Hartopoulos, and I had, like I said before, Davo Slots came in, and he was really really good. It felt that was like a really natural conversation that we had. And then I would say for something different, it was kind of a sports episode, but Peter Hooley, who plays for Melbourne United, he's got a very, very unique story that sort of pulls at the heartstrings a little bit, and that was a great episode as well. That was one of the earlier ones. Sorry, I don't know all the episode numbers, but just give those names a search and should be able to find something.
I must have missed that one early in the piece because I heard him speaking on the Seabulls obviously moved to now become the NBL 1, and he was on the NBL's putting a lot of resources into it, and they're producing a weekly recap show. And Peter Hooley was just on there, incredibly well spoken.
Yeah, he is, and he's got a blog as well. I wish I could plug it, but I don't remember the name of it.
I can track that down. It won't be too hard to find. Yeah,
he's a great writer, and he's been writing for a long time.
Oh, that's awesome. I actually was going to, for anyone that's listening that's interested in the basketball side of things, and that's maybe where you see the connection between the show and Clay, etc. I remember a really great episode. I think it was with the captain of the Mount Gambier Pioneers, Tom Daly.
Yeah.
He might not have been a captain. I might be making that part up. But I remember that he was at that point probably their best local player. And he was just talking about the amount of strains and injuries and crap you have to live with, even at that level, which is, only the second highest level in the country. Like an injury is just – it was the first time I thought that I had some insight into just how devastating an injury can feel. Yeah,
the toll an injury can take mentally is just.
And he was obviously doing a great job handling that, but you could tell that team had a lot riding on his health, and he just couldn't stay healthy. And I mean, you just got. I think what I loved about that one was, and it's probably what happens over time as a podcaster, you get better at just letting people talk out their stories and not interrupting them. Like that's what that happened to me. If I used to think people were lulling in their story, I would start talking to try and cover up something. And what you did brilliantly in that one was you just let him talk it all out. It's like he was getting free therapy. He probably needs to send you a couple $100 for that one.
Yeah, no shit.
Yeah, so I'll link that one up too, just to the basketball fans. So
yeah, no worries.
Righto, mate. Well, it's been awesome talking to you, and obviously I listen to the show when I can. And one thing that Clay's doing that's really awesome is that you're putting effort into like listing what's actually in each episode. So if you don't feel like you have enough time to commit to a whole episode, you can actually see it's pretty obvious what are going to be the really funny bits because the way you write each part is pretty funny. So,
just try to make it easy to navigate, and it lets you know the timestamps of everything that I talk or most things that I talk about.
And as Clay and I actually spoke for a little while before we started recording tonight, it would be ideal to be able to release a long episode and then have somewhere else where we could chop out all of the individual segments into their best bits and have them as well. But neither of us have the resources to really do that. So what we can do, though, and I do it with Punching Sideways as well, is list what's in the episode. And I've been lazy, Clay, because I've stopped putting the timestamps in there, which I really need to go back and start doing again. Because that's almost a way of like segmenting the show without actually having to edit it all up like that.
Yeah, it is hard though because you've got to go through the episode and listen to the whole thing. So it's like editing it twice.
And you're just so. I mean, I know from playing in bands for 20-something years, all you hear, like, the guest sounds great. They're fantastic. What the fuck was I doing? I'm breathing too heavy. I'm popping the microphone. I'm stumbling on my words. That wasn't funny. That was a non sequitur. What the hell am I doing? Like, all you hear is your own mistakes. I don't know if you feel like that, but.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I hate listening back to it because everybody should be, and I am for sure my own worst critic. And I mean, that's part of how you grow. I mean, if you thought you were the best ever, you'd never get better at anything.
No,
but
and nobody would want to listen to that.
Yeah, Joe Rogan.
Yeah. We'll leave that one. We did talk about that. Yeah. Righto, mate. Well, thank you, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right, cheers, man. Thanks for the time.
Yeah, see you, mate. Bye-bye.